Simply, neoliberalism is the idea that society should be shaped by the free market and that the economy should be deregulated and privatized. Or even simpler, what works in the private sector will also work in the public sector.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I have a dream today.
Your body went to sleep, but your mind is still caught up in a warfare. Your mind is the battleground.
It's psychological warfare.
With AJ Norton. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a great day today, an absolutely fantabulous day. I'm doing good. By the way, I just want to remind anybody, if they want to become a supporter of the show, please go to psychowarfare.com/Patreon and become a member, become a subscriber. Support the show for a few quarters every month. You can sort $1, $5, or $10, I believe I have it there. But other than that, also, if you have any guests for the show, please email me, aj@psychowarfare.com. But getting into today's podcast, what's it going to be? It's 7 a.m. today. I woke up really early, and I decided that today should be a podcast on our current ideology, or I guess the hegemonic economic ideology of this world, and that is called neoliberalism. Now, it has nothing to do with being liberal, like being gay rights, socially liberal, or anything like that. It's mostly an economic paradigm, and I think it has filtered down into every area in our life, and I'll get to that reflection, I think, about it in a moment. But I'm going to let this nice little clip that I found, and then I'm going to read some clips from a book, or some readings from a book, before I continue on what is neoliberalism. It's a cool term, but it's pretty simple, I think, and I think you guys will understand what's going on here. Here's my clip.
In this iteration of 3-Minute Theory, we bring you a concept that you might not know by name, but have surely felt by its far-reaching effects: neoliberalism. Simply, neoliberalism is the idea that society should be shaped by the free market and that the economy should be deregulated and privatized. Or even simpler, what works in the private sector will also work in the public sector. But it doesn't stop there. Neoliberalism also involves the idea that the public sector should not only follow the private sector's rules, but it should also subsidize the private sector, which we know is now owned by fewer and fewer global capitalists. While neoliberalism began to reach its current heights in the late 1970s, it has its roots in Enlightenment liberal humanism, or classical liberalism, the belief that people were free to live their lives without a great deal of interference from the government. So what does neoliberalism have to do with classical liberalism, and why does it matter? Well, neoliberalism isn't really new itself, but is a new take on classical liberalism. Neoliberalism uses the language and tenets of classical liberalism in ways that now benefit large corporate interests. For example, many of the tenets of liberalism were enacted in the name of equality, meaning that free market policies were supposed to allow people an equal chance into the marketplace. Under neoliberalism, however, the free market loses its ties to democratic ideals and instead allows corporate capitalists to open up previously unavailable markets. Basically, the free market becomes increasingly free for wealthy corporate capitalists and less free for everyone else. Although neoliberalism is a discourse that we cannot necessarily see, it has real material effects on many aspects of our lives. Let's take the American public education system as an example of how business interests have infiltrated public systems. In the past, public schools were set up to offer a free education to promote the liberal humanist ideas of liberty and equality. But with the rise of neoliberalism and in turn education reform movements, the lines between public and private education have been blurred. What we now see is heavy private investment from private individuals and corporations. In the name of liberty, neoliberals use the business-laden language of choice, free market, and deregulation to dismantle and then reconstruct public schools in a corporate image. This all happens through the use of language that sounds lovely and freeing, but ultimately doesn't prompt too many questions from the general public. As corporations take a strong hold in the public sector, we also see the reciprocal investment of public school dollars into private companies. Not familiar with the education system? That's okay, you don't have to look far to see neoliberalism at work. Remember, neoliberalism is everywhere, and it isn't limited to one political party. It's both right and left, and conservative and liberal, which makes it very hard to work against. So next time you hear a politician or CEO talking about the greater good, take a moment to wonder who's good. More often than not, the good being held up as liberty for all might really just be more money for some.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Her voice was very nice, and I think she does a great job at explaining that. But essentially, that was a 3-minute explanation. My 2-second explanation simply of neoliberalism is the fact that the free market should take the highest everything should be viewed through the eye of the market, essentially. The market idea that everything can be a commodity is the highest priority in life. And I think this really prioritizes deregulation and privatization. So almost every public sector idea or things that should be probably supported by the public sector, our tax dollars are given over to the private sector or, moved generally in that direction towards privatization and deregulation because, big government, that lousy big government, that democracy is getting in the way of capital and making money. And where I think neoliberalism has been really evil in today's world, this is just my opinion, is that it's come down, it's descended, it's trickled down into even all social values. So because we are an individual and essentially we have to compete, and I'll talk about this when I read some quotes later, we see everything through the eyes of the market, and so even our friendships essentially are commoditized. When you make a friend, maybe it may not be somebody who you can just have fun with, who you can laugh with, who you can get in a hot tub with, who you can have what I call a bonfire moment where you eat, pray, love, laugh, but instead fuck. But instead, no, you don't have to fuck everyone you go to a bonfire with, guys. But it's the fact that you just think of, okay, what can I get out of it? What value can I extract from everything I do, just like a commodity? How can I make a buck off someone? And so you may think of a friendship, in my opinion, as, I've done this, I personally can tell you, you go to a meetup and you say, okay, who's going to get me the job? Who's going to get me the girlfriend? Who's going to get the person that's going to lead me to an awesome social circle? Or, who's going to lead me up the corporate ladder to the C-suite job? The CEO, CFO, all those C-suite jobs. Someone told me, I just learned that term the other day, guys. I got to use it in the podcast. What else am I doing rambling at 7 a.m. otherwise? But I think that really hits home for me, explaining in that way, is that it's the idea that essentially everything can be commoditized, that we can, privatize every single juncture of life. And they use the education example as a great example. So, we put $600 billion into public education to help this country. And so what does the private sector do? Well, the private sector says, oh, government's getting in the way of education. We can make it better. And so they commoditize education. And what's the big problem with commoditizing things like putting a price on some things like healthcare, education, and what's the other big thing I keep thinking about? But definitely those two is that, when you monetize essentials in life, I would say education and health, that your goal is to make the most money, is to extract value, when in fact your goal of those things, what does it mean to teach someone about artistry? What does it mean to, educate someone with a job with something that, they may not use for a profit, to just teach them to be creative, to teach them to think, to teach them to be artistic, and teach them to kind of not be a consumer, not be, a debt slave. There's not much money in that, and so it's a soulless kind of ideology in that I think it's an attack on the imagination. Since everything's for money, there is no place for art. in neoliberalism economics. There is no place for, to be healthy. You're incentivized to privatize and deregulate. So I think like things like McDonald's, things like Burger King, things like Goldman Sachs, where, they operate a lot on privatization and Goldman Sachs deregulation, and that because they're making money, they're obviously being prosperous because they've consolidated power through the free market. I'll get to if it's actually a free market later. They are doing better. They're doing great in the neoliberalism ideology. They should actually be idolized. But in fact, I think what they're doing is they're privatizing a problem. McDonald's is privatizing getting you fat, and then it socializes the losses. So McDonald's doesn't have to pay for the heart attack they give you, or your whole family getting sicker. And obviously, things like that, they would say, oh, you can't directly link obesity to McDonald's. And while that's true, they definitely don't incentivize you to live a happy lifestyle. They're not incentivized to give you healthy food, because healthy food would mean, you're filled up and you don't need to come to McDonald's as often, while having usually don't want to go nutrition on you, but high-fat diets fill you up more than high-carb diets. High-carb diets don't have much nutrition, and so thus you have to eat more, and so there's more of a chance you're going to eat more McDonald's. But things like that, right? Your purpose is not to solve problems in a way. Your purpose is to profit off problems. So whether that means profiting off of people's obesity, something like smoking shouldn't exist in our society. The number one choice to decrease health is to not smoke. It's the number one preventable cause of death. That's the statoid of today. And I'm going to read some quotes now about neoliberalism from Peter Joseph's book, which, if you haven't ever heard of Peter Joseph, he's the man who narrates the Zeitgeist films. There's 3 of them. Watch them on YouTube. I highly suggest them. The third one is my favorite. The first one is completely different than the other 2, but I would consider it a trilogy. The first one's all conspiracies. But the Zeitgeist movies, the third one, I learned more about like humanity than I feel like the first 10 years of school. It's just very informative about biology, about a little bit about economics, and about where we're heading ecologically as well. But back to neoliberalism. And these are some quotes he had about neoliberalism, and I really want to read them to you. Today, he writes, the U.S. leads the world in terms of both economic influence and military force, endlessly pushing the neoliberal values of free trade as a root priority. Like a philosophical crusade, it has been deemed an imperative of Western business. Political leaders, to ensure the people comply with what is in effect the new global religion, a religion that invariably prioritizes commerce over everything else, with human rights increasingly subordinated to business rights. When one understands how the rules of trade, property, and exchange have become the determining mechanisms of society, decoupling focus from actual life, supporting means and factors of social trust, and dehumanized, conflicted, ridden nature of the modern world begins to make a lot more sense. Given the ethic, education is simply another product to be bought and sold and nothing else. Moreover, laissez-faire or neoliberal predominance in economic policy, specifically in the West, constantly refocuses attention on the importance of the ownership class rather than the wage-working majority. The mantra that the rich need more tax breaks since they are the job creators, along with the vast exceptionalism big business experiences when problems arise, reduce any ambiguity as to who is deemed socially important. These laissez-faire views were reinvigorated in the 1980s during the Reagan and Thatcher era, when further tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, and a move from public provision to private provision were seen as they were the only solutions to social woes. The long-term result has been an exacerbation of inequality and further loss of public and environmental health. So we went from a tax system with FDR, where he had a top tax bracket of 91%. It's going to be slashed if the tax bill passes of Trump. passes, it will go down. I forgot what the percentage is, but it's something in the 20s, right, for the top bracket. It used to be 91% in the FDR era, guys, and then it went down to 35%, I believe it's currently today, in the top tax bracket, and that's progressive tax. So if you don't understand how that works well, then you probably don't do taxes, and you should check that if you don't have your parents paying taxes. But he's saying that, the rich basically stopped paying their fair share as they are viewed as the job creators. And they're simply, this shift to the management class, this corporatism, in a way, neoliberalism definitely includes corporatism in it, a idolization of, these deregulation centers that have written the rules of the free markets. It's not a free market. It's not a free market for everyone. It's a free market for whoever creates the market. Markets are written by somebody. They always, whether you have a free market or not is always a big discussion to begin with. He also writes, at the same time, the free trade or market discipline hypocrisy is palpable, as it most certainly doesn't apply to the rich and powerful. From too big to fail bailouts. That's also something else I have to add, is the bailouts show this example so provenly about neoliberalism. So neoliberalism preaches shifting everything from the public sector to the private sector to make money, but it also relies on the public sector to get bailed out, because the inherent hypocrisy of the situation is that free markets must be helped by the state, by the government, by centralized power. Oh, that damn centralized power. To facilitate itself. All markets have needed help from a big entity, in the past. But this neoliberalism assumes, liberate finance, but it counts on the state to bail them out when they get too deregulated or when they get too greedy, which will eventually happen with deregulation. So the hypocrisy of this ideology that we basically, one, we haven't presented a solution out of neoliberalism, which we are still deeply in. Trump's a neoliberal, Obama's a neoliberal, Bush is a neoliberal, Clinton is a neoliberal, Bush Sr. is a neoliberal, and Reagan is a neoliberal, and it probably starts there. And it started just with Jimmy Carter, but barely. But before then, that was the beginning of the neoliberal era, is that a lot of people, I think, aren't educated about neoliberalism, and that's why I hope you can talk about it after listening to this podcast. And I don't think that an answer to neoliberalism has been put forward. And I think with the ecological crisis, the environmental crisis, global warming, we're going to need a resource-based economy. And I hope to cover that more in another podcast I'm hoping to lay out soon. And so I think that's the big problems, is that while I think people have realized that this current system doesn't work, they haven't defined the flaws in it as clearly, and they have not put forth a solution. I think the biggest problem is the solution, because I think most people don't really have a solution, and there isn't even a group really leading a solution. The truth is that open markets only give advantage to those with the most economic leverage, coupled with endless amounts of government collusion to ensure that leverage. This is what Peter Joseph writes. Such is the inevitable paradox of the free market once again. So to be clear, the neoliberal reality actually has little to do with free trade and everything to do with strategic advantage on the part of vested commercial interests that are far too often directly tied to the international lending and trade institutions. That's like the World Bank, IMF. Deregulation, trade liberalization, and privatization are political tools used to force open a country's economy, making it vulnerable to profit, seeking interest, and otherwise wouldn't be able to interfere. Yes, so globally, neoliberalism is definitely led by the United States, where they want to go into other countries and be able to extract their resources and privatize them and let ExxonMobil, BP, and other companies. I covered this. This almost started with my Eisenhower podcast, where, we performed a coup of Mossadegh in Iran because, he wanted to nationalize the oil companies. But BP, who owned the oil industry in Iran prior to Mossadegh attempting to nationalize the oil, went over and asked the U.S., the CIA, and Eisenhower to help them overthrow Mossadegh and replace him with the Shah. So neoliberalism is also used as a hegemonic process by the U.S. mostly, but mostly by the West, which is Western Europe, UK, U.S. and Britain. U.S. and Canada, Jesus. Another quote, Italian theorist Franco Berardi has attempted to find some order in the chaos. In his work, Heroes, Mass Murder, and Suicide, he provides valuable speculation correlating what it means to live in our competitive neoliberal society, a society that structurally produces winners and losers, along with shame and humiliation for those who see themselves as the latter. He states, suicide has increased particularly rapidly in the last 45 years by 60% according to the World Health Organization. It is epidemic, and what else has happened in the last 40 years? Neoliberal transformation. We are seeing an all-time high in the need to compete economically and a general low in sensibility in human relations. The frequency of psychopathology is also on the rise. What is the core of neoliberal ideology? Firstly, that you are alone, that you are an individual competing with everyone else. That is so important. So that is another way to phrase neoliberalism. Secondly, that the real distinction among human beings is between winners and losers. There's no more stable class identity, no more stable political identity. The real divide is between neoliberalism's winners and losers, Bill Gates and that poor guy on the street. And if you are a young person who has grown up in this capitalistic environment, and you understand that actually you can never be a winner, what will you do? In some cases, you decide that you are going to be a winner for a second, for an hour, for a moment, because you feel like a winner when you kill all the people around you and then kill yourself. And this is not just my theory. It's not me saying all these horrible things. It's Eric Harris and David Klebold, the two young men who committed mass murder and killed themselves at Columbine High in 1999. They wrote in their diaries, which are available to read for anyone, "You gave me all this shit, telling me I'm a loser, but I will be a winner for a minute." And so you can see, it's not so much the neoliberal ideology that motivates mass murders, it's much more the particular psychological effects of this neoliberal ideology. So he took that down a radically dark path. Jesus Christ. So that's the end quote, sorry. End quote, start quote. Now, I highly suggest picking up The New Human Rights Movement by Peter Joseph. Such a great book, talks about structural violence, which I definitely have to do another podcast on. But if you guys like that, you're going to like the rest of the book. And he has some more quotes, but he talks about the ripple effects of neoliberal economics. And something I also would say is that neoliberal economics does not calculate externalities. So externalities is the ripple effects of your decisions of mostly business. So if you're an oil company and you pollute the lake, and then there's a fishing company at that lake, and, they obviously, give their fish out, and all that fish is poisonous because you polluted the lake, and then everyone sues that fishing company. Well, that fishing company, goes bankrupt, possibly, maybe not, but they never actually get to tackle the real problem, which was the fracking and oil company that was there in the first place that polluted the lake. So that's one thing that could stem for externalities. A simple example would be, okay, if you produce all these cars, there's now more cars on the street, now they're crashing. Is it your responsibility to have safety standards of these cars, seatbelts, or do you not need them? Do you actually have to be forced to pay for them? And that's when you have to sue them. But there should be kind of a systematic shift where, we should be trying to prevent externalities from the offset. We should be trying to make the most ecological, healthy and safe environment from the get-go, not realize, oh, we made a mistake, let's sue, let's sue the tobacco, sue the cocaine companies, sue the tobacco companies, after we realized, oh, you guys were just trying to make a profit, and now we're going to sue you because we figured out this is all a farce, and then we have this 20-year-long battle where we argue if it actually is a health threat. And today, that is what has happened for global warming ever since. They admitted it in 1991 with the first International Panel on Climate Change report in 1991. We're still arguing in the mainstream media to what degree it's happening, but at this case, it's not individuals dying, it's the earth disintegrating before our eyes. Another quote about neoliberalism. Today, the co-opted term freedom has nothing to do with one's right to well-being, justice, opportunity, expression, or ability to choose how one is to focus his or her life in a pursuit of happiness. Rather, Freedom now refers to the freedom of trade, the freedom of the movement of money and deregulation of business. It is about economic freedom, but not economic freedom in the sense of sovereign nations being able to choose how they wish to govern, with democratic sanctions of their populace. Rather, it is about the freedom of the most dominant and powerful businesses to enter, abuse, pillage, and exploit as they see fit. It is their economic freedom, not anyone else's. In the words of Noam Chomsky, neoliberalism operates not only as an economic system, but as a political and cultural system as well, because profit making is considered the essence of democracy. Any government that pursues anti-market policies is being anti-democratic, no matter how much informed popular support they might enjoy. Equipped with this particular understanding of democracy, neoliberals like Milton Friedman had no qualms about the military overthrow of Chile's democratically elected Allende government in 1979 because Allende, hope I'm saying that name right, was interfering with business control of Chilean society. He then adds regarding the nature of political democracy in neoliberal cultures, that is neoliberal democracy in a nutshell. Trivial debate over minor issues by parties that basically pursue the same pro-business, pro-policies regardless of formal differences and campaign debate. Democracy is permissible as long as the control of business is off limits to popular deliberation or change. That is as long as it isn't democracy. So basically, economic reform is off limits in neoliberalism. And I think that's the distinction really with neoliberalism, is they don't care about social policies because you're an individual and you have to compete. It doesn't matter if you're gay, black, brown, transgender. The neoliberals, the economics doesn't care. You still have to compete, and, big business is looking to, privatize and deregulate every sector. And you, as long as you're alive, you're participating within their box of neoliberalism. So, anything that's attack on economic policies is laughed at, and it is, and that's why a lot of policies, I believe, of Bernie Sanders are laughed at. It's, how are you going to pay for that? Well, we're going to pay for that the same way FDR paid for things 70 years ago. We're going to tax the hell out of the rich. We're going to make their, progressive income tax, put up the highest bracket to whatever, 90, 70, 80%, 70% under, who was after Eisenhower, under Kennedy, and when we had our highest economic growth ever, soaring economy, 50s, 30s, 50s, 70s, a lot. So, that's what people ask, how are we going to pay for that? And another simple way would be just to stop our military budget spending. I mean, really, just if anyone wants a simple question, how are you going to pay for any public policy you want, any socialist policy? Take it from the military budget. And I bet you if we spend $600 billion, I covered this in the Eisenhower military speech, publicly we spend $600 billion. And I covered the secret budget, because the budget of the CIA is secret, and, the private military-industrial complex is apparently $1.2 trillion, according to the assistant to Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State. So that's what I always think about social policy. So if we eliminate our military budget, which maybe we can't eliminate, but we could take at least, I think, $500 billion off the top, maybe $400 billion. So $80 billion is free college every year. And that's every year, $600 billion, folks. That's every year. So free college for 1 year is $80 billion. That's the high range. I'm going crazy. It's 50 to 80, but I'll give you the top bracket, top range for it every time. And then whatever you want. You want to end poverty? I'm sure 20 billion for some affordable housing would do a lot of damage. And just buy a shelter, buy a building. I'm sure you could just buy a shelter in every major city and reduce homelessness in New York City or something. But I'm just going on my thing. Anyway, that's my answer to how you're going to pay for that. Just reduce military spending. Just transfer military spending. You already pay that. We pay the taxes. You just don't reap the benefits of your taxes. Wouldn't you like your tax money if they're going to come, if you're not libertarian, if they're going to come, into your house and force you to pay for police and firemen, at least, make those firemen, be a benefit to society. Make your money do well for you. That's my rant for today. So another thing, let me know if you guys ever want to email me or tweet at me if you think these podcasts are good, because my My dad tells me I ramble a lot, but I think I'm getting better. Neoliberal globalization, Peter Joseph writes, includes not only the ethic that free trade and business power should prevail over democratic institutions and state policy, it also embraces capitalism's tendency toward constant hegemonic expansion. So another detail, I don't know, this may be neoclassical economics, but also just our underlying economic problem in general, is that we assume infinite growth in a finite container. Our finite container is the Earth, the whole globe. So we're assuming, you can chop down all the trees you want, grow as much cattle as you want, drain as much oil as you want, when that's just not true. You only have so many trees, so much water, so much, ice glaciers in the Arctic, and there's repercussions of cutting all that stuff down, and you have to include that externality in society. And so he's really talking about is that these deregulation and privatization and the liberalization of business is a reason to, overthrow governments if they ever affect your bottom line. Winners and losers, right? Those governments who want to nationalize industries for the people, for the poor people. Listen to my Eisenhower episode about how that happened in Guatemala. They're seen as losers. And then his last quote, an approach to economic and social study in which, this is the definition, I believe. An approach to economics and social study in which control of economic factors is shifted from the public sector to the private sector. This text views neoliberalism as birthed from the free market superstition triggered by Adam Smith. At the same time, the practice reality of neoliberal application is, in fact, contrary to pure free principles. One second, I can't read this. Assuming a true free market is even possible. So he also goes on another principle. I did another podcast. Peter Joseph believes a true free market isn't even possible because as soon as you start a free market and you have people competing essentially, I shouldn't go into this much, I'll just say this, that any free market, if you truly have a free market, results in a monopoly. Someone is going to it's going to centralize power because, you told people to compete and someone's going to compete and a winner's going to be produced, and with their winnings, they're going to ensure their future winnings. You're going to have a monopoly if you have a true free market. That's why you need that free market to be regulated in some way. But let me check the timer. How long I've been talking here? Almost 30 minutes. I should end this here, guys. I think the quality of this sound is getting better. I really like the arm I just bought for my podcast. I hope you guys are going good. If you want to support the show, I would love your love on Patreon. Love it, sweet baby Jesus. Let me know how you're doing. Please give me reviews on iTunes. I'm at 29. I would love 30. I got a 4-star review for the volume. Trying to work on that. Trying to talk louder. But I think I've got that figured out. I've got a good way of now doing the audio, doing the broadcast, and I've been messing with the editing, and I think I'm really Gucci right now. And I hope you guys have a great Christmas. It's only December 7th where I am right now. I'll probably release this maybe next week. I'm trying to store a few podcasts out to get ready for the winter so I can go on vacation and release these as I go. But I hope you guys are doing good. Love it if you would support the show. Be the first patron. I know it's tough to take that dive. It's like, that date. Do you want to date the nerdy guy with the glasses? But I'm telling you, he has a great personality, and you'll be really happy if you swipe right. Gosh, man, I should do that. I should make a little video. It's like swipe right on me for Patreon. But no, I hope everyone's doing good. Please comment. I really got to get community. I'm talking about neoliberalism, and it destroys individuals. It tells you, you can't be a community. You're an individual, and you have to be a winner or a loser. And if you're a loser, it really sucks. And I don't know if I really believe in that theory I read earlier by Marco that it fuels, school shootings, but I think it fuels this mentality that, you're not valuable unless you're economically valuable. If you're a musician or an artist who, you didn't make some, mortgage scam to make you billions of dollars or, privatized the internet, which, was made by the public dollars, or privatized, education because you got that money from the government, from our tax dollars, that you're a loser. And I think that's really true. I think we need to solve this problem, let's talk about some solutions here because I don't want you guys to leave me so soon. Is that I think the solution again is to somehow revitalize communities. The fact that, we are all one, and whether we realize it or not, we're all going to die together anyway. Or, some of us are going to die together. We need each other to survive, just like I would argue you need insects to survive. You need a tree. The way I kind of think of it is, when you guys watch a movie, I don't know how many of you have ever sat through all of the credits of a movie. It's very common if you ever watch a superhero movie or whatever, the Marvel, what's the other industry? I don't know. And you wait to the end of the movie, right, where they have the special secret scene where they again get you to come back for the 5th sequel of the Transformers series, which sucks dick. But you watch all those credits, right? And if you may not even pay attention, but there's so many things people do, right? Artists and stunts and directors and executive producers and all these little jobs that you were not aware of. And that's kind of like who you are. If the credits for your life went down, it would be like mom, dad, sister, 2nd grade teacher, blah, blah, blah. A guy who makes your coffee at Starbucks helps you be energetic for the interview you have in the morning to get that awesome job. College, all the people who made that college, the president of that college helped you out. If you ever taken a math course or calculus, who's in your credits? Isaac Newton is there. So the value and appreciation that, collectively we have all helped each other out and that we stand on the heads of giants to further the cause, to make the ladder higher for our sons and daughters and grandkids. And we need a way of relating to each other other than through the market. So destroying that, I think, will reclaim our humanity. And by humanity, meaning we can have more bonfire moments. We can laugh, we can pray, we can love, we can eat, we can fuck. No, not everything's about sex, guys. But how we do that, I think, is really important. And I think we should get off our phones. I think it comes a way of we need to use technology. Think about how we use technology and think, is technology actually improving our life? Are we becoming better human beings? Because a lot of times we're just becoming so efficient, we don't actually use the time saved to enjoy ourselves. We don't, say, oh my God, this iPhone saved me so much time. Now I'm just going to check Facebook for the rest of the day. Instead, we should, go in the hot tub, walk our dog, go on a walk, call your mom and tell her you love her. And instead, I think we become more efficient, right? And then we just spend that time either wasting it or using that time to become even more efficient, and we never smell the roses. And I think that's a after effect, really, of neoliberalism, is that, you're always competing and you're scared shitless that if you stop competing, you will become a loser, that the market will wet you down and demoralize you, destroy you. And that's a big problem. And I think the sad thing is, we become so efficient. Our technology is already so good, guys, and we should try to pursue, sorry, I'm burping, some utopian society where we at least use our technology to work 30 hours a week. We've been way more efficient. Why isn't the global poverty rate going down? Or why are there still 1 billion people without nutritional needs? We've become so efficient that we should at least be, saying, hey, maybe the top people should stop and we should focus on these very poor countries instead of trying to extract their resources, saying, oh, Somalia, or having blood diamonds in Africa, or trying to extract the oil in Somalia, or bombing the Middle East. Instead, reflecting on, I think, what it means to be humans, and I think ultimately, we're still meant to be cavemen on a social level. We're still meant to, hunt in packs. Somebody picks the berries, somebody kills the cow if we want to have meat, and think about, how I still think we're meant to, socially we're cavemen. We work off human contact. No matter how much you're on your phone, you need to be loved, physically, not sexually, but you need a hug, you need a handshake, you need a high. That's why I think things like high fives, I think it really takes us back to social caveman days when you actually interact with each other. You're saying high five, you're giving that, endorphins around each other, saying, yeah, man, when you play basketball, I think it's kind of like, it's the caveman kind of style of wrestling where, you interact with each other. You work as a teamwork. And I think, basically any sort of team building exercises, real team building exercises, not bullshit team building exercises, where we actually exist as a whole, where, we decide as a collective where we want to go as a democracy. Because while, we preach capitalism and democracy coexist, and they're almost fused together, with this competition, it's actually kind of attack on democracy that, some of us have to end up better than the other. But I think the idea of democracy is that we collectively are moving equally in a direction of maybe better technology or a better lifestyle, at least as a country. And collectively, we want to move towards that goal to have a global democracy where, if you want to have your own finance system, you can in your own region, but you can also say no to fracking, no to oil industry. You can decide which areas of your life can be privatized or open for competition and which ones you should collectively work towards as a community, such as health, such as education. And for instance, you could privatize technology, so you could have your Apple and your Microsoft competing, for instance. But it's going to take a big day for us to get out of this situation, from this Trump situation. And I have a little bit of hope with Jeremy Corbyn, and I think Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie Sanders is going to run in 2020. I've said that. I said that in a past podcast. Bernie Sanders is going to run, and maybe the Democrats will stop him from implementing any socialist policies, but maybe he can bring them along. I don't think so, personally. I think the Democratic Party is too corrupt. But Jeremy Corbyn is in slate to be the next Prime Minister of England. I don't know when the election is. Obviously, they had a special election last year, or this year. And I have hope for the Bernie Sanders movement, and hopefully, he can pull at least a little bit of the Democratic Party. They are very holden to corporate interests, such as the neoliberals of Obama and Clinton. Republican Party isn't much either. The optimal solution would be to get a third party, but that's not happening. That's not going to happen within a 4-year time span. It's just every year they think third parties come around and then they never go anywhere. Johnson's been running, Johnson got 4% this time, and he got probably around the same time in 2012. Third parties don't really gain much steam. They learned that lesson with Ross Perot. I have to do a podcast on him. But anything that engages with our communities, and I'm trying to do that now. I'm going to go to a Democratic Socialist of America meeting today and see if I can meet some awesome people. Go on meetup.com if you want. Man, I got to end these podcasts with a good message. And just, reconfigure your way to society that, we should love each other. I think we should appreciate each other, because if we don't understand that we collectively act in a finite space, the Earth, then global warming is going to come quicker than later, and it's already come for these equator regions with Syria facing an increased drought and wildfires in California and blah blah blah. Yeah. I know. I'm really worried about the global warming thing, but I am really worried about the global warming thing. I should write a book about it. Maybe this podcast will turn into a book eventually, guys. But no, I think neoliberalism is very important, and I may make this podcast the top one in my website, psychowarfare.com, because I really want people to know about this ideology and know what is governing our times. And this ideology has come about since the 80s and has not been defeated yet. And I hope we can be close to that. And largely, the loss of Hillary Clinton was a huge rejection of neoliberalism, but we still ended up with a faux populist in Donald Trump. But that's how much people hate neoliberalism policies, and it also showed itself in Brexit, and it showed itself in the election of Donald Trump, that people were screaming for an end to these free trade agreements like TPP and NAFTA, and the future ones in the TSA, Trade and Services Agreement, and the TTIP, which are in secret, and we only know those exist because of WikiLeaks, but they have not been available for the public. Google it if you don't believe me. But that is the only good conclusion, is that people, while they may not be aware of the problem, they're voting against it. And I love that. I think that's a good thing that, the loss of Hillary Clinton showed the defeat of the neoliberalism. But it won't be truly defeated until we give an answer to it. And it still got replaced by a neoliberal, someone who believes, deregulation and money and profits should be the topmost priority in society. And that is still Donald Trump. People may call his ideology neo-fascism. I guess that's true, even though I think the real fascists are the people surrounding Trump, and Trump is just a celebrity. That's the only thing Trump, to me, is good at. He's a celebrity, and he's a fucking good at celebrity. And since we worship celebrity culture, kind of just like how I see Ronald Reagan, he was a movie star before he was president, even though I wasn't alive back in the Ronald Reagan days. I think that's true, that I say it all the fucking time, he's a good celebrity, and, we need to recognize Trump's weaknesses and his strengths, and he's really good at being a celebrity, and that's why Twitter helps him a lot. A lot of celebrities are vapid, popular pop culture thoughts, and Trump personifies that perfectly, and I think that's really great that he can just tweet anything and dominate the news conversation. And also goes into this whole for-profit media bullshit where, so the media is a huge result of neoliberalism, and it's the fact that Bill Clinton in the 1990s deregulated, privatized the media industry. So media corporations are now 90% of what you see, hear, read is by 6 companies. 90% of what you see, hear, read, and hear of the news is 6 companies: Viacom, Disney, something. But it's just something to think about, that I think the idea has been rejected, but we have not put up an answer to that. And that's a big problem. When, Bush was defeated and we replaced with Obama, we thought we got, I think, a socialist. We thought we had gotten somebody who, was going to turn the corner on this terrible foreign policy and these terrible tax cuts. And we didn't. They disguised, the establishment gave us a neoliberal. It gave us Barack Obama, who was nice to the banks, who, he talks about, he knows how to campaign well, but when he got in, he was a lackey to Wall Street. And people caught on to that. And I definitely think Trump is the result of Barack Obama, and that people are such fans of Barack Obama need to admit that, he was the reason for Donald Trump. And I think something that also should be said is that if Hillary had won, and to be fair, she only lost Electoral College, and she lost by like 77,000, 78,000 votes. She only lost by that much, which isn't much when 120 million people vote, even though it's only, 62% of the population. Don't get me started on why people don't vote, but what was I going to say? Sorry. So my point is that if we did not get Trump this time, and instead Hillary, a figurehead of the neoliberal ideology, went on for 4 years, then it would only have incentivized the populist right movement, and we would have gotten a Ted Cruz or a more crazy right-wing nut who ideologically is more right-wing, which is, I believe, Ted Cruz in that case. So we were gonna get a crazy right-winger eventually. With it's the result of neoliberalism. So we were going to get a Trump. A Trump was in the pipeline. It just is so insane that it was him instead of Ted Cruz. But that's kind of how I see it. Is like, what if we didn't get Trump this time? What was in the pipeline? And the pipeline was 4 years of more neoliberalism, of economic bankerism, and possibly the Wall Street banks crashing again. And that may happen regardless of who's president, Trump, Bernie, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that would only fuel right-wing populism, which hasn't gained a foothold yet. But now, hopefully, Trump, shows the ugly face of right-wing populism, and then we can actually start to cure neoliberalism, which I believe is going to have to be a reflection on our community, which lends itself to that dreaded scare word, socialism, and why I think Bernie Sanders is the best credible answer to neoliberalism, because he's the only socialist at the federal level. Like, there's no one else. There's no one else at the federal level you can vote for who is an answer to neoliberalism. I don't even think Elizabeth Warren is. And that's why I don't support the Democratic Party, and I kind of agree with Chris Hedges in saying that the Democratic Party isn't viable. But what else are you, in the short term, it's kind of like short-term gains, long-term gains. In the short term, what else are you going to do? You're You're gonna not vote for Bernie and vote for Trump again and get 4 more years of this. I don't know if the country can stand 3 more years of this, but we're going to. I don't think he's going to get impeached. Okay, that's my modern day political discussion for today, and I got to do another episode on net neutrality. I only understand a little bit of it, but if you guys like the show, please check out psychowarfare.com for more articles and my other podcasts, and also subscribe to me on iTunes, and have a great day, everybody.